1944, on the south side of Boston, the most intelligent man in the world died. Ironically and tragically, it was his brain that killed him. William James Sidis, a man whose IQ was somewhere around 250, died of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 46, which was the exact same illness that killed his father. William's exact IQ can only be estimated, since his sister, Helen, exaggerated his actual scores when she spoke to biographers. But researchers believe it was 50 to 100 points higher than the IQ of Albert Einstein, which was 160. Whatever William's actual IQ was, he could read the New York Times before he was 2. By age 6, he had learned English, Latin, French, German, Russian, Hebrew, Turkish, and Armenian. Then at age 11, he entered Harvard University as one of the youngest students in the school's history. Harvard at 11. By all rights, William Sidis should have invented something incredible back in the 1930s, like the internet or Doritos tacos. William easily could have become the leading mind in mathematics or physics. By now, the name Sidis should be as familiar to us as the name Einstein, but it isn't. By the time he reached early adulthood, William Sidis was an unhappy recluse. After graduating cum laude from Harvard, William admitted that he had been a laughing stock. He said he had never kissed a girl. He was chased and humiliated by other students. And he talked about leaving the academic world forever to become a laborer. Eventually, William would write books, but very few of them were written under his own name. He used at least 8 pseudonyms, meaning we may never know how many books he published under other fake names. I think it's safe to say, in every measurable way, hyperintelligence, or the expectations that came with it, made William Sidis miserable. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-da on the internet and get to the juicy facts.
Big Bang Theory, Sherlock Holmes, and House have tried to convince us of one thing. Hyperintelligent people might be unbearable to work with, but it's worth putting up with all their idiosyncrasies to get a glimpse of their genius. In movies and TV, people of genius IQ are usually portrayed as hyper-competent. And if they're not wealthy already, then they're rising stars, like Mike Ross from Suits or Doogie Howser MD. Well, once again, the Re-Engineered You is on the case, because today we want to tackle 3 myths about intelligence. Myths that make the rest of us feel like big dum-dums. Myth 1. Intelligent people have it made. Besides, if you know everything, you could just coast through life telling the rest of us how to screw in light bulbs. Myth 2. Intelligent people get paid. Because if you have all the answers, clearly we should be following your lead, right? Myth 3. Intelligent people get laid. Like they said in Sherlock, brainy's the new sexy. But how brainy is too brainy? How smart can you be before it becomes unattractive? But first, we're going to define exactly what we mean by intelligence.
Okay, so here's the part where I embarrass myself for the sake of the audience. But first you. So, Todd, have you ever taken an IQ test?
I've taken a Wonderlic. That's the closest thing I've ever taken.
A what?
A Wonderlic, it's a test they give for overall general intelligence.
Oh, okay. How'd you score, if you don't mind me asking?
Above average.
Above average.
Yeah.
Okay.
Smart, but not super smart.
Not Doogie Howser or Sherlock.
No,
Okay.
you already knew that, though. What about you?
I wasn't smiling too big when I asked about your intelligence test.
You had a little doubt in your voice. When I heard you said scored well, you kind of like, what, you did?
How'd you do? Yeah. I have not taken any of these tests. We're talking, today's episode, we're talking about the IQ test, the Mensa, and which isn't a test. They base that on IQ. And briefly, we're going to mention the SATs. Because when we talk intelligence, we are specifically talking about basically IQ and the ability for people to absorb and aggregate knowledge or facts.
And Joe and I both believe, and I'll speak for you on this, is that there's different kinds of intelligence. Mechanics are a different kind of smart than engineers and
absolutely
and artists are. So we do recognize that, but we're doing measurable tests in today's shows.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. We know the whole yarn about Steve Jobs and that everybody is a genius at something. I believe that people can be remarkably gifted at things. We are just strictly talking about IQ tests and standardized intelligence tests, specifically those that Mensa looks at. We're not referring to them as intelligence tests as a mark of particular genius. We just mean IQ. And I have not taken an IQ test or SATs or any other standardized test. Each of those, for my background, each of those would have required money when I was a kid. And we didn't have that. So if it was even like a permission slip to go to a museum trip, my parents were iffy on that.
It's for the upper academics to get the IQ test.
Right, yeah. I think that's for people whose parents who give two shits. So, but William Sidis, his parents, we'll find out, really, really were invested in him being a genius.
But there are people that are bred and born that are just super, super smart.
Right.
We all usually went to school with one, valedictorian, hardworking, but had... So William Sidis' early life, great breeding to begin with. His mother was a doctor, and his father was a famous psychologist. And they were on the same page on parity, Joe. They sat down and said, we're gonna have the smartest human being. That's going to be our son.
So they planned him out, basically.
From day one, they spent every cent they have on maps and books and toys to start him off on a pace that no one had ever done before. They were breeding a genius.
Okay.
He later in life said that his parents were pushy and aggressive. And to me, I see it as, from my background stuff, as the sports parent, who my kid's going to be in the major leagues or the NBA. And we're going to do whatever it takes to get them. The Tiger Woods dad, like, put a golf club in their crib, glue it to their hands.
Okay, so this was basically like the academic equivalent of having coaches for parents. They were in it.
100%. As a young boy, we talked about how he spoke all these different languages earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He actually invented, at age 8, his own language. Now, this is not Pig Latin like we have when we're kids, where there's 5 words. He had a complex language, and it was based on Latin and Greek, but it also drew from German and French.
So he was able to repeat this. It wasn't just like gibberish once. Okay.
So we could be speaking that today if he would have got up and running with it.
That's like some Tolkien stuff. Like he basically invented Orcish.
Yeah. He also, as an adult, he ended up speaking, and this is measurable, 25 languages and dialects.
Wow.
And just so you know, not that it's still around, or we might want to bring it back, we could get fluent in Vendergood. Vendergood, that was his language.
That's his, okay. Well, that sounds way more elegant than Orcish. That's Vendergood. I like that. Kind of sounds like a candy bar. Vendergood? I would eat a Vendergood.
He was 8.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's really what he was doing. So apparently, there are some. I'm not going to say the word costs. Like there's a cost to being a genius, because that almost makes it sound like it's a magic gift or something. But there are a couple things that are possibly associated with genius level IQ. If you'd like to hear about them,
Please.
so what our vendor good inventor might have suffered through. So this is a study they did where they took members of Mensa and they gave them they gave them things to fill out, basically. So to clarify, we already mentioned Mensa and IQ tests. There are more than 100 countries around the world with members in Mensa. Their ages are 3 to 103. And they come from all walks of life and education levels according to Mensa. So this is from their website. They say that there are janitors, doctors, scientists, artists, carpenters, police officers, hermits, firemen. So it's not so much about, like, you don't have to be in academia to be a Mensa member. You just have to take an IQ test and score within the top few percent of people. And here's what they got from their members. They sent them a questionnaire, and they found out that there are some correlations with genius level intelligence and depression and addiction.
I'm not surprised by that.
Okay. Well, so have you seen the show House?
Yes, I have.
The part where he is depressed and addicted all the time? Apparently there is some real science behind that.
Well, they just have to slow down that monkey brain of theirs. It just won't stop.
Right.
They overthink themselves miserable.
I used to, before this article, I that's how I thought, that's how I assumed. This article actually kind of does validate that when we get into hyper-excitability. So our assumptions might have actually been pretty correct on that. And I think that's going to be validating for a lot of people listening when they think, why would a genius level IQ be so sensitive or the whole joke about an inhaler. Everybody with, IQ higher than 130 has an inhaler.
Yeah. It's a certain look, right?
Yeah. There might be some validation to that idea. So this also comes from an article by Scientific American called Bad News for the Highly Intelligent. And they say that for reasons not completely understood, people with intelligent or highly intelligent IQ, they live longer, healthier lives and are less likely to experience life events like bankruptcy. So they live longer and they generally don't have as hard a slumps financially. However, as we mentioned, surveyed Mensa members, this from Pitzer College, read by Luth Karpinski. Their survey showed that when they asked about mood disorders like anxiety disorders and spectrum disorders, they compared the Mensa members who responded against the national average, and here's what they found. More than a quarter, 26.7%, of the sample reported that they had been formally diagnosed with a mood disorder, while 20% had been formally diagnosed with anxiety disorders, which is far higher than the national average.
Staggering high percentage.
Yeah, that's. I think each of those percentages nationally is around 10%. And the prevalence for environmental allergies. So we're joking about the inhaler and peanut allergies, tree allergies, grass allergies. That's triple the national average. So when you get into genius level
so you
IQ,
see the sniffling nerd with the thing. It's a real thing.
Right. The glasses and the rubbing their nose and everything, all true. Like it's they are higher than the national average. So that's not just a stereotype. That is something that Scientific American has showed.
I truly believe if I was smarter, I would see things coming faster. Like if I read more and I knew more, then I would make less mistakes.
I don't know if that might be true, but it also might give you blinders. I mean, this is based on no data whatsoever. But if you are hyper intelligent, don't you think your brain would be occupied with something else? Like you're too busy thinking about a Rubik's cube to see a baseball flying in from the left side.
No, that's true. You're based on higher things, yeah.
Again, that's just assumption. All we've shown here is that mood disorders and allergies are more prevalent. Now, from the same research, Karpinski had a theory about this, why there's a higher prevalence for intelligent people to have these mood and these environmental allergies. Karpinski says it could be over-excitability, which means that people with higher intelligence have greater reactions to environmental threats or insults. Now, this can be startling. Like thinking about being highly intelligent means that you are aware when somebody yells at you from across the street, or when your nose starts sniffling and itching. Like it might just mean that you are quicker to respond, and you're quicker to go to the doctor over a symptom or an allergy or something. But then I started thinking about WebMD. I try to internalize everything. Whenever I read research, the way I remember it later is I try to think of, how would I react to this? So you and I, we're going to pretend real quick that we have hyper-intelligence. So we're like Doogie Howser or House or something. Okay. And then we spend one evening, like we have a rash. Say we have a rash on our hands, and we go to WebMD and it says it's cancer.
We just freak out. We start
freak
overthinking
out.
It.
Right.
We start shaking. We start living it.
Right, exactly. You and I, we did an episode about procrastination, and we found that the easiest way to bust procrastination is to imagine the consequences. Now, instead, imagine that you have a genius-level IQ intelligence, and you immediately imagine the consequences whenever you have a problem.
Because you read it 6 years ago and you remember.
Right.
You don't have to look it up.
Right, exactly. So when we talk about genius level IQ having higher percentages for anxieties and allergies, I totally get that now. Like that actually makes sense to me. This is just a theory, this over-excitability theory, but it's a pretty, so far it's pretty well accepted. Being overexcitable also means ruminating more. It means you get into a loop where overanalyzing a threat can affect the body's triggering responses, the flight or fight, and that in turn can trigger the body to release more cortisol, and it can also lead to more stress. So it's basically a feedback loop you can get caught in. And again, this is all just theory. There's some correlation. It's possible that people who join Mensa are simply more preoccupied with intellectual pursuits. They may be perceived as smart already and are thus more socially excitable. So it may be correlation, not causation. And just to sort of give a nod to everybody out there who loves the show House, yes, high intelligence is linked to alcoholism. Our brains, if you are highly intelligent, as we covered in our alcoholism episode, you're oftentimes more prone to drink up. So go ahead, eggheads. That's a green light for you, I guess.
You're going to feel better. This will make you feel better.
Right, just a little bit. It's not a justification. It's just saying there is some strong correlation there. So, speaking of social anxieties, I want to ask, our man William Sidis, the smartest man on the South Side, how was he with social anxieties? I assume he was amazing at talking to girls, right?
Well, there's not a lot about his elementary and middle school thing. But keep in mind, he was a celebrity. He was written about from a very young age. So he was famous. So he was like a child star. Now, he went to Harvard at 11. But his father tried to enroll him at 9. He was qualified at 9. So, and I was doing some of the reading, doing some of the research. He didn't just go to Harvard. He dominated his classes. He was cum laude. He lectured for the Harvard Mathematical Club on 4-dimensional bodies. And it was such a great lecture, it got him worldwide attention.
Wow. So, I want to interrupt you really quick just for a second. Imagine going to Harvard as a full-grown man and seeing a 9-year-old get marched in.
I'm glad you brought that up because competitive academically are the Ivy Leagues, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to see him as a threat.
I would throw myself out a window. Like, if I saw a 9-year-old teaching my class, my head would explode.
So this made him a target. His parents actually had to remove him afterwards because the kids weren't just bullying him and chasing him around. There was a plan to get him.
Oh, okay.
So I think we know get him means beat the whatever out of him.
Right.
So they didn't care that he was a little kid.
Man, as a kid, okay, so not only would you feel persecuted because you're a kid, but we just got done talking about how hyperintelligence makes you hyper aware of threats socially. So that's horrible.
And he just didn't fit in. I mean, he's a little kid with all these, like you said, grown-ups.
Right.
When he graduated, he talked to reporters and he said that he was going to make a perfect life of seclusion. He said he had no interest in women and love didn't interest him. In his life, he only had one romantic interest, and he kind of dated one woman, and that was it. He wanted to remain celibate, and he said that his intelligence made him miserable, and it totally isolated him.
Okay, so we kind of teased that at the beginning, that he might have been miserable from his intelligence, but he just said it outright.
He was miserable from probably the day he was born, with being pushed aggressively by his parents, and he kind of went past all their expectations.
Right.
But I know that smart people, geniuses, are rich people. Right, Joe?
Right, obviously, because we see everybody who has a Ferrari doing, Mensa Sudoku in the front seat. No, I'm being glib, of course. One of the first things we wanted to look at when we started looking at this episode, both Todd and I were thinking, highly intelligent, genius level people, they got to be getting paid. Like that's got to be the biggest.
They've got all the degrees. They're the physicians. They know what stocks to buy because they can analyze it.
Right. That's always what we see in movies. Like the one that comes to mind, we mentioned this up at the top of the episode. The guy from Suits, the genius that can literally memorize law books in one sitting. Like, they've all got to be doing that. Like, if you have a hyper-intelligent brain, you've got to be on Jeopardy, right?
Well, I was thinking like The Big Short, where this guy sees changes in the markets that nobody else sees.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Get everybody on board, but he doesn't have the social skills to win them over, but...
Right. So they're all geniuses in my mind are just sitting in jobs where they answer people's questions and then ignore them and then walk into their office and listen to heavy metal like that guy.
It's a great movie.
Yeah. So we're looking here at the difference in income. Difference in income for intelligence. So how much of your income is changed or determined by high IQ? So if you have a genius level IQ, Todd, how much do you think that alters your income?
2x, 3 times as much.
That's kind of what I thought. I thought it had to be like double or something, like 25%, 50% higher or something. According to the National Academy of Sciences, if you have a genius level IQ, your income only affects your earning ability by about 1 to 2%.
I see it as a winning lottery ticket.
Yeah.
Like you can, like the world's yours, so you can make as much as you want. You just do it in whatever is your passion.
Right. I always assumed if you were a genius, you would just you would have something like you answer, like you said, stocks. Like I always thought you would just have one little thing that makes you money by being a genius.
You develop an app and you have $50 million, so you're...
Right. And the rest of your time you focus on making theoretical model planes for stuff that doesn't exist. Like I assumed you'd be doing something weird, genius-y in your basement, and then once in a while you pick a good stock and then you're fine.
But you're telling me it's 1-2%?
That's 1 to 2%.
That's not worth the addiction, the depression, or the allergies.
Right. Yeah, just the sneezing alone. That same study found that personality plays a much bigger part in your financial success than IQ. Specifically, and here's the word of the day for me, something I've been focusing on after reading this, conscientiousness. So, conscientiousness, also known as wishing to do one's work or duty well and thoroughly. We're talking diligence, dedication, perseverance, discipline. However you want to put it, that apparently factors more into your earning power than your IQ. It's way higher than 1 to 2%. This study did not exactly give a number to it, but it seems both this study and anecdotally reading good articles from like Forbes and stuff, they agree. Conscientiousness determines a lot more. Now, this is just a personal note for me, and I actually want to know how you feel about this. I kind of believe in hard work and dedication, but I also believe there's a joke online where somebody is talking to their boss, and their boss is driving a really nice car, like a Porsche. And one of the workers is like, how'd you get that? And he looks at him, he says, if you come into work every day and you put in your hours and you work really hard and you really do your time, I can buy another one of those cars next year.
Not you get one, but I'll get one.
Now, I personally...
There's a reason that's so funny, Joe.
Yeah.
Because it's true.
It is, yeah. Anyone who's a day worker or laborer or works for basically hourly, everyone knows that feeling that your boss is going to get another Porsche next year. But I do believe in hard work and dedication and creativity, that if you find something meaningful in your life to do, say for you and I, it's a podcast, that once you can dedicate yourself to something that is enriching, that's different. That's where you get conscientiousness.
And I think a lot of really good geniuses that I've known, the people that I know I wouldn't say they're geniuses to what we're talking about, but are very bright, they don't stay focused on something long enough to get the benefit of it. They change channels a lot. Right. And so they're just not in the same road for long enough. Or they would get there, but...
Yeah. Another way to put conscientiousness into frame so that we understand why it plays a big factor in your financial success. Conscientiousness is more... so in school, you can have like sort of the genius kids that ace tests, and they don't seem to care very much. Like they everything comes easy for them, and they just still blow through a test, make their grade, they're fine. The people that actually get solid good grades all throughout school, the valedictorians, those to me weren't geniuses. Whenever I talked to them, they were conscientious. They worked hard. They scheduled their classes out. They had a plan. Like they were just good, solid workers. I think a large portion of grades and success in general comes from conscientiousness.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw around a word that gets overused in business right now. Emotional intelligence, EQ. Todd just made the gun to the head motion. It gets so overused in business.
It does.
It
Every
is one
seminar
of those.
and everybody.
Right, exactly. So I'm gonna torture you a little bit. We're gonna talk a little bit about that, just very, very briefly.
Oh, great. I want to do a whole show about it. Put me in that coma.
Just to aggravate you, I am writing the next episode entirely about EQ. Something they talk about in Harvard Business Review is that people who have strong social skills and jobs that require strong social skills, those will be way more difficult to automate in the future. Social conscientiousness factors into that. So if you're doing something that requires social skills and conscientiousness, you're not going to be replaced by a robot in the next 10 years, most likely. Hard to automate jobs, which require social adeptness. Those will be the ones that stick around the longest.
That makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Oh, totally, yeah. And that's another reason to advocate for social responsibility, basically. One last one I want to discuss with you about conscientiousness. Socially responsible and generous people make more money.
Really?
I
would have thought that.
I've heard about the generous part. There's a lot of studies about how people who are generous, it's not so much that giving away money makes you money. It's not like the thing you hear at church where you give and the Lord will provide back. I think it really is more about people who are aware of how successful they really are, and they have the money to give, and they can plan it out. I think that planning, that diligence, probably means more on paper than just being generous.
Well, and what is important to me, and is you hear a lot about now, is social responsibility. And that's something that resonates with me. It's something I look up to.
Yeah. Ditto. I'm gonna actually quote from this article. This is a Forbes article by Vanessa McGrady. This is two articles, the Forbes and also a Mass Mutual study. And they say that people who are generous and who fall into this category, it says, quote, they really take their own personal time and sometimes resources to help their communities. They're putting some of that attention toward their own financial foundation as well. So again, when we look at why somebody is generous and socially responsible and conscientious, why they would make more money in their lifetime over, say, somebody with a genius IQ, a lot of it really just comes down to engagement, that they're willing to put down roots and they're willing to take time. Because if you're going to invest financially in wealth, or not wealth, but welfare and your community, if you're going to put money into good causes, you're going to want to know that you're putting it into something beneficial. And so that requires engagement. That requires you to stop, think about what you're putting money into.
Do your due diligence.
Right. It's not just people who, March of Dimes is knocking on their door and they give out a bunch of quarters.
That's what I was thinking. I think the generous part comes when you have $1 billion and you give it all away. But climbing up, you don't give anything. You take, and then you give. But you're saying that's not the case.
Right. It's people who take financial responsibility along the way, but they just do it in smart ways. It's not the collection plate at church. It's not March of Dimes. What they're doing is those are both good things. But really what it shows in these articles, they're taking the time to consider what would be best for the community, and then they are giving where they think it'll make actionable change, which that's something I could learn from, definitely. So we're talking about being well-adjusted and being grown adults, which is something I struggle with sometimes. Can we talk a little bit about Sidis as an adult?
Yes, I'm going to go a little bit off here because I've read through this, and to me, anytime you're really good at something, there comes some attention, and some of that's going to be romantic attention. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, success does bring all the boys to the yard, I think is the way the song goes.
Well, William Sidis has looked at a picture of him. He's a good-looking cat.
Mm-hmm.
And he only had one woman that was interested in him. And so I'm thinking that he was probably missing, and this is just some social cues through the years.
Okay, so
I'm sure
some of the charm might not have been there.
Yeah, and so I'm sure there was women that is interested in him. He was just probably very unapproachable.
Okay. You had to have a certain level of math intelligence probably to hit on him. To
even have a conversation with him. And so he started writing. We talked about how he ghost wrote a bunch of different books.
Yeah.
And I'm going to listen. From 1898 to 1944, he wrote under Frank Foppola, Parker Green, Jacob Marmer, Barry Mulligan, John Shutter.
Barry Mulligan?
Yeah, no,
that sounds like a fake name. Somebody didn't look at that on a book and be like, this guy, this is fake, obviously.
Well, when they interviewed his sister for his biography, she rattled off a whole bunch of them. So there could be
tons.
Who knows? Yeah, there could be 30, 40, 50 of these. And what kind of came out to me about the dates, Joe, was that he kind of went back and forth. I mean, he didn't just use one for 3 years and then one for 3 years. So this guy's brain, he was just pumping out books after books like Stephen King.
Okay, so it's like me online writing fanfic. But by the way, if you see something written online under the pseudonym Barry Mulligan, it's me.
See, he's trying to get on the
making a comeback.
Now, what's interesting to me is being as smart as he was, he's dumping a lot of time. He became obsessed with train trolley transfer tickets.
Okay.
So he would go to train stations at night, like the subways, and he would pick up these old tickets. And I'm going to pause this real quick.
Okay.
So this genius, this is what he's spending his spare time doing. Now, tell me what that picture looks like to you.
Okay, I'm looking at it looks like a torn brown paper bag, like a flat paper bag like you get if you bought comic books from a comic store, except it is completely stuffed with train tickets, old ones, not like transfers that are new. These are all ratty and torn and printed on and stamped. So he's just carrying these around like
He's collecting them daily, and his friends are freaked out about it because he's spending, in their opinion, way too much time on this.
I don't know what to say about this because on one hand, I know he's a genius. Like you've been telling me the story. It's hard to look at this pile of tickets and not just think garbage. Okay, so if they need a genius to figure out train tickets, they've already got a printing system and they've already got numbers on all these. So like I think the figuring out has been done. Like I think whatever he's trying to divine from this almost feels to me like a mystic reading like animal guts. Like this doesn't.
A tint of mental illness here. Now, the name of this book is Notes on Collection of Transfers. That's the name of the book.
Okay.
So I'm reading through this thing. This should tell you how excited my life is, too. And I found a chapter that I got excited about. It said, "What is a derelict?" So what I thought that was some drunk homeless person on the train, right?
Okay.
What they look like, what to do with them. No, Joe. A derelict is a lost ticket.
A lost ticket.
So he has a system of what you're supposed to do with the lost tickets. I mean...
You mean throw them away?
Says the sane man. Not after William Sidis. So the reason I brought this all up was his family was concerned about his mental health.
I can see that.
He was
now?
He was a directionless thing. They even threatened if he didn't go and see a psychiatrist, his father was a psychiatrist, that they were going to have him committed.
Okay, that's a very credible threat. Then, like, go see your father.
But the father probably too close to it, can't help him.
Right.
Blinded by greed and love.
Right. His father would be a professional. He would know to get him committed by another psychologist.
Oh yeah, you're right. He can sign for it. He doesn't need a judge, right?
Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, well, we have the perspective of time, so cute crazy, but that is crazy.
Let me ask you this, Joe.
Okay.
What does a healthy relationship look between two geniuses? Can they...
It's a lot of passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, and a lot of jokes that you and I won't understand. a lot of Star Trek jokes. So, generally, while I started researching about this, I tried to get inside the mind of geniuses. And I did that by sort of haunting around on Mensa, on their open forum, and just generally reading up about people of genius level IQ.
What they're doing, what they're into.
Yeah. And earlier, I read out what Mensa states that their members come from, the different walks of life, the different jobs. But I quickly realized that it's as diverse as people who have done something in their life worthwhile, and then that's what they're clinging to. Now, this is not a knock against Mensa members. I don't want us to get hacked by Mensa. But really, it felt like a lot of the people who were who needed to know that they had a high IQ. A lot of them, it seemed like somebody in sports who once scored a touchdown, and they had to talk about it.
Still living their high school football dreams and using that as a shield or a trophy, as opposed to taking it and doing something productive. And
it becomes a cornerstone of their personality. It seems to me. That's my observation from the outside. And I think that when we talk about how IQ only determines 1% to 2% of your financial success throughout your life, I think it is actually that statistic is sort of upholding that bias I have. The idea that it's more about what you do with it. It's not so much about what your score is. So relationships between highly intelligent people, and this is just going off of a couple of studies I found. I don't want to speculate, and I don't want anecdotes. So for this, we are looking at, first we're going to start with this cross-cultural study that surveyed 200,000 people whose intelligence was rated as the number one preferred partner trait. So this from Psychology Today. They said that men rate intelligence as the number one preferred trait in the women they're looking for.
See, I would think that wouldn't be so.
Yeah, it was followed very closely by looks.
Okay, yeah.
So that I think you're in my assumption that men are dogs. When we're like, it's going to be looks, it's going to be looks, it's going to be looks. No, it's for men, they rate intelligence higher.
So Joe and I are both in the public speaking world, and we've been at these speeches where a man will get up who's super smart, and you and I have both seen all the women gush.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about when I think of intelligent, attractive.
Yes. This one might surprise you. Actually, I'll frame this as a question. What do you think the number one trait for women is when they rate attractiveness in men?
Financial probably intelligence. I've been thinking right with the men.
Nope, it's actually humor.
Okay.
So women rate humor as number one, closely followed by intelligence.
Okay.
So for women rate humor as number one, and then intelligence. For men, they rate intelligence and then looks.
So they want to be entertained and a good spirited.
Yes. So smart is attractive. We started the show with a quote from Sherlock where they say brainy is the new sexy. It is. Smart is generally attractive. And as far as a species goes, that makes sense. Our current world, what we live in, we reward for intelligence. Like all of our systems are built for, can you manage a bank account well? Can you foresee potential crises in your future?
Yeah, more resources.
Yep. A lot of it comes down to resource management, I believe. But there is a line to be drawn. So smart is attractive, but not too smart. So this comes from the University of Western Australia. They want to find out how smart you can be before it becomes unattractive. So instead of relying on rank orders or ratings, they focused on the perceived attractiveness of specific levels of intelligence. So they sampled 375 individuals with estimated IQs of about 100.
Super smart.
Super smart. I think it's... I'm trying to think of the number. Men's is like 130 or something like that. But so we're going to have to quickly define attraction. Attraction, be it sexual, short-term or long-term partner interest.
I want to be with you.
Right.
Now and forever.
Yeah, it just the reason I want to like split hairs on this is because if you look at somebody and you're looking at their IQ scores and you're thinking hyper intelligent people, you may start a different kind of planning. Like if you look at somebody's dating profile and it shows their IQ, if you see that they have an IQ of like William Sidis, 250, that's not attraction at that point. That's somebody thinking, okay, my kid is going to be a god. So that is a different kind of plan. So we're looking at purely knee-jerk attractiveness. And I'm going to read through this starting from the lower intelligence higher. So we're going to talk about how attractive from the bottom of the scale to the top. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
So you can feel free to raise your hand when I reach your percentile. So if you know that. From the first percentile to the 50th percentile, as far as intelligence goes, it rose in attractiveness almost in the same rating. So if you're in the bottom 3% of intelligence for humans, you're probably going to be about the same rating for attractiveness.
Why are you looking at me like that?
No, we're going up in scale.
Let's head north, please.
Yeah, let's head north. So first to 50th percentile, attractiveness raises appropriately. Again, when you hit about 75th percentile, and then it starts going up sharply, and it peaks at the 90th percentile. So if you're within the 90th percentile of intelligence for humans.
Yeah, I'm not. I wish I was.
You're not? Okay.
I'm a little lower.
Little bit.
I'm getting smart as I've been hanging around with Joe. It's kind of...
Now, 90th percentile, to give you guys an idea of your IQ at that point, that's about 120.
Okay.
So when you reach about
That's brilliant.
120,
That's one of the smartest cats you know, probably, right?
Yeah, any room, any office you're in, if you're at 120 IQ, you're pretty much the smartest person in the room at that point. Actually, quite literally 1 in 10. If you're in the 90th percentile, you're 1 out of 10 people in the room, and you're probably the smartest. However, when it went up from there, from the 90th percentile, when you hit 99th, so you're 1 in 100 as far as intelligence goes, attraction goes down. So men and women both reported less attraction to individuals who were in the 99th percentile than they did for people in the 90th percentile.
And you would think that would be the most attractive person. They're number one.
Yeah. You would think seeing somebody in the 90th percentile would make you super attracted. It's like, oh, that person's going to be super smart. But that's not the case. It appears less desirable than the slightly less smart counterparts.
Do you think that the social thing goes off the train goes off the tracks at that point?
I wonder if people expect that. Because this is all just them rating by looking at on a screen. They're not meeting these 99th percentile smart people. They're not meeting the hyper-intelligent. They're just basing this on their own sort of life experience and expectations. So I wonder if the expectation there is, if I dated this 99th percentile person, they would be correcting my vocabulary, maybe? Maybe they'd be intolerable. I went digging for that, too. I wanted to know why.
If it's just an insecurity, I don't want someone that smart. They're going to be critical of me.
Oh, that's that word you used, insecurity. I think that's probably dead on. I went digging. I wanted to know why wouldn't hyperintelligent be desirable in a mate, and I found lots and lots and lots of anecdotal articles. I could not find a good, solid, call a good article for this. But the anecdotal ones that came up on Google, they're all goofy, and they're all like, why you don't want a smart partner, and they basically put up reasons that you would expect. They expect somebody who is smart to overthink everything, to believe they know everything, to keep score in a relationship.
Take the fun out of everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
Fun
your
killers.
and my assumption. Yeah. So if you were William Sidis, when you're talking about how he only had one girlfriend and he didn't date much, I kind of can see that now. After reading these articles, I kind of get that.
Well, he lived a very independent and private life. And in 1944, our hero, Mr. Sidis, he died from a cerebral hemorrhage. And he was only 46 years old.
Wow.
And
that's pretty young.
It is. And his dad died young, too. But you just think, with that brain and that work ethic, write all those books and do all that studying. He could have lived and done at least 30 more years of good work.
Right. He could have lived as long as Einstein and produced something other than train tickets.
He came out. The only reason he came out of seclusion, Joe, was because he was so pissed off by this article the New Yorker wrote. Now, the interesting thing is that the newspapers kept track of this guy because he was this boy wonder.
Okay.
So at first they had all these high hopes for him. Then towards the end of his life, they got more critical of him. Like, what a waste of talent. What a waste of a brain.
Oh, geez. So, like, when we think about how much hatred comes out for child stars, I mean, that's got to be even worse back then.
And it's kind of what we talked about earlier about his real expectations. Was that what crushed his spirit and his soul? He didn't think he could live up to him in his own mind.
Yeah.
He worked mindless jobs. He died in a small apartment. He sued the New Yorker and made a lot of money. But when he died, he had what would be in today's money, $2,500 is all.
Wow. We talk about geniuses not making as much money as we expect. That's tragic. So, quick question for you. Do you think the cerebral hemorrhage had anything to do with how brainy he was? Todd and I are not doctors, by the way. I just want to know, because when I saw that on the screen, it was a cerebral hemorrhage. His brain killed him.
I think he just didn't take care of himself.
That's probably more accurate.
Yeah,
I wish... You know the old sci-fi pictures of like the Martian with the really huge head? That's what I'm imagining.
You think he thought so much his head exploded?
Yes.
That would be better for one of your fictional stories.
I want that to be true, but you're probably right. He probably just needed to take care of himself better.
Just from all the readings I had, I think that he was used by a lot of people. It's kind of the feeling I got. His sister went on and made all these outrageous claims about him after he passed. And why didn't she do that when he was alive? She waited until he was gone so he couldn't defend himself. And she said his IQ was much higher than it was, and his test scores and all these tests were much higher. But why do you have to exaggerate that? They're already off the charts.
Right. Do you think it was just family pride, or you think she's trying to make something out of it?
Family greed.
Okay. That's tragedy on tragedy.
You don't have to be smarter than Einstein to live a good life. You don't have to be a Mensa genius to be a good leader. People with high intelligence, on average, make a little more money than the rest of us. And higher IQ is correlated with living a slightly longer life at a price. High intelligence also linked to increased rates of depression, addiction, allergies, and social disorders. So if you're already a genius, then congratulations. Really. Joe would like your help writing our Doctor Who podcast episode. But for the rest of us who can't remember obscure facts or square roots, keep in mind conscientiousness, social awareness, and perseverance can be the rungs of your financial ladder. Develop them and climb. Whereas being born a genius is like being born with platform shoes. Finally, we want you to remember, brainy may be the new sexy, but if you're working on a book about transit ticket stubs, then there's only so much sexy the world can handle. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can also connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com, where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.
And speaking of opinions, we're going to read another 5-star review.
iTunes review.
This is from No Pamphlet for That. The hosts have great chemistry. It's obvious that tons of thoughtful research have gone into every episode. I really love being able to connect the past with the now, and this team makes a way to really connect with history that's presented while making its learning very tangible for the listener. Thank you again, No Pamphlet, for that. And
thank you. We love you, and we really appreciate the support.
Everyone who has given us a 5-star review, you're amazing. And I will send you your certified genius badge at some point.
Yeah, but you bastards with the 1-star, we're going to send you something else.
We'll send you train ticket stubs.
A dead squirrel.
Right.